The move to Texas was a few things. So Kim and I were at a church for 14 years. And we help lead ministries, and we're on leadership and a really valued part of that church. And just some things happened where we didn't agree with them. And we didn't know any other church family. We didn't know anything other than this church. And so as we started to go look for other churches in Orange County, I was also on a few business trips out to Frisco, Texas, working with some big orthopedic groups in Texas, doing some consulting, some sales, and I stayed at Sadir's house. And Sadir wasn't there most of the time. He was on business travel, and he had helped us. He was a foundation in helping us in Hyderabad as well, only he was doing out of the kindness of his heart. And I will say this, and hopefully this makes the cut. I told Sadir from day one, you're doing too much for us. Sooner or later, you're going to want in. Why don't we get you in now when we're this little fledgling company, instead of when we're becoming a very successful company? It's going to be a very difficult conversation. And that was prophetic. That was true. It was difficult at the time because we had grown so much, and the value of our company was pretty significant. And so when we brought him in, he was also giving up a significant career. He was well off. He was a valuable man at the company that he was working for. I do believe they were the largest Microsoft reseller in the nation, and he played a massive part of that. And so he gave up a lot, but we're giving up a lot. And so we made it through some bumps and bruises. Sadir and I became true brothers at that point, because there was a couple times we shouted at each other and yelled at each other and then hugged afterwards and maybe shed a tear or two. But the one thing there was always is a certain level of trust that I had never had with partners or people of the past. And that's not just Sadir. That was already in Sharon and Neelima. The same with Ramana. There was just a level of trust that we had kind of dug deep together and overcome some challenges, just the challenge of the ocean in between the two offices. The anchor that kept us in Huntington Beach, California was our church. And as we started to look around, at the same time I'm visiting Texas, I just saw a different lifestyle and culture that I admired here. And I felt California was different than what I grew up in. I felt my kids it wasn't the same upbringing. And I just saw some things in the culture in California that I didn't want my kids to deal with. Primarily the financial aspect. You know, Kim and I started talking a year or two before we moved that, like, we want to remain a tight family and live close to each other and grow old together. How are we going to do that in California? Unless our kids have MD after their name, it's impossible. I mean, we couldn't even afford our own house at that time. The equity in it had grown so drastically. So I looked out here at houses on a business trip. I went home and I told Kim that night after we put the kids to bed, how was the trip? And I just told her, I want to move to Texas. I want to move to Frisco, Texas. And she cried because she had been wanting to get out of California for a little while. And because of the business, I couldn't imagine, how do we do this? And I've never let a how stop me in business. Sometimes it's just go. And so within weeks, Kim and I came out, hired an agent, and looked at a bunch of houses. I think within a month we had put an offer on a house. It got accepted. And I think that was June of 2017. We landed boots on the ground in Texas December of 2017. And so there wasn't a lot of overthinking it. And I think that's where we, in business and life, we can get stuck overthinking things and asking all the what ifs. And we didn't. We were united, and we said we're going to go. And so we went. And I bounced offices when we first landed in Frisco. I think in that first year, I worked from home for about 4 months. I'm not an at-home guy. I can't do it. I need people. And so moved into an office. Priya and I started working together in the office. But because we were starting to hire people, it was kind of the rent-a-cube. And then we needed private offices, and then we needed multiple private offices. I think we got to like 6 or 7 employees in a rent-a-cube space before we were like, we got to get our own place. But I was the guy always moving. And so it was, again, go back to childhood. I moved schools, 6 times in 4 years. I felt like that. I moved offices probably every other month for about a year. And so that's a bunch of moves. Like I didn't have my space that was my space. So we finally got our own office, and that's when I really felt settled. Like, okay, and that was probably a year and a half, 2 years in. Okay, this is going to work. We have home base, and then the challenges of our Hyderabad team is growing so quick, the company's growing so quick. How does Sharon and I work together when for 4 or 5 years we were just offices next to each other? How do we do this? So that was a challenge, but again, the trust was there.